Well, I'm not sure what that was, but it was something. And that's probably about as good as this episode's going to get. Right, hi guys, and welcome back to the Crawl Room. We're here once again in this wonderful room for all things Formula 1. We're going to rant about the race as always. And if you've never seen this episode before, then it's as simple as this. I'm going to rate every driver out of a maximum score of 10 points. If you do particularly good at it, I can give you bonus points on top of that. If you have a particularly bad race, it's a 0. And I can give you minus points as well if I'm feeling particularly cruel. And there we go, it's as simple as that. And what can be said about the Barcelona Spanish Grand Prix? La 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 la, Barcelona! It was an absolute snooze fest, wasn't it? I was bored. I was bored watching that. I was trying to keep my eyes on people that were pitting and going up the order, down the order, etc. And yeah, I was nodding off, I'm not going to lie. But, you know, nonetheless, we're going to kick things off with the race winner, of course, and that was Lewis Hamilton. And what could be said, it got pole. But does anyone else think that Bottas bottled that? I don't think Hamilton did a good enough job to deserve pole. It was just that Bottas' second run was not good enough, was it? Just less than a tenth shy. But yeah, Hamilton got pole nonetheless. And then off the line, had a fantastic start, managed to stay ahead of all the squabbling behind. And just pretty much broke clear, led every lap, and won the race. And it really is as simple as that for him. Yeah, I don't know really what else to say to that. It was just another dominant performance by the Mercedes car of Lewis Hamilton once again. Red Bull couldn't rival him this time at all. They tried but failed. And yeah, seems like the tyre woes of Silverstone had gone at Barcelona, and Barcelona, it was quite hot. There was rumours of rain, but I was just looking at it going, we know it's not going to come. Stop trying to hype it up to something it's not going to be. And it never did. Never even had a smattering. So for Lewis Hamilton, I'm going to award him a solid 8 points. And the reason it's not a perfect 10, despite the perfect pole led every lap and win, is because 1, he's got it too easy, and 2, I don't think that pole lap should have been pole, if that makes sense. I know it was, and that's not Hamilton's fault it was, but I think he could have got more out the car. His second run was particularly bad, so if Bottas had hooked it up, then it would have been a Bottas pole. But 8 points I think is fair, considering I'm judging people based on the car performance that they've got. I think there was other drivers up and down the field that did a much better job today. So 8 points to Lewis Hamilton. And then we come to Max Verstappen, and what can be said about him? It was a good race, it was an okay race by him, but I felt there were just a bit too much whinging over the radio, and yeah, I kind of see where you were coming, Max, let's just focus on your race. But if they just focused solely on Red Bull's race, then there'd have probably been a good chance that Bottas would have overtaken you. So you've got to think of it in that sense. Yeah, focus on your race, but when you've got a Mercedes behind you, you do have to think about them. You know, and if Mercedes bugger up ahead and put Hamilton on the wrong tyres or something, you need to be within a window to be able to attack them. So you need to be thinking about the cars around you and not just yourself. P2 really was the maximum we could have got out of it today. Hamilton was pretty much in a league of his own from the get-go. And in the race, yeah, the moaning really did start to grate me a bit. I didn't mind the grammar comments in the previous race at the 70th anniversary. That was just a bit funny, but, you know, he was just sent to be every other lap, and I was like, oh, come on. Come on, Max, now, you're better than this. Keep your head down, keep focused, keep looking ahead, just keep focused. But, yeah, the moaning got to me this weekend by him, unfortunately. But overall, a solid race again, P2, so beating Bottas in the fellow Mercedes. And, yeah, I'm really just basing the scores on, as I mentioned, taking the car out of the equation. It was a good race by Max once again to finish P2 ahead of the Merc, but overall, the race wasn't one of his best that he's had so far this season, and for that reason, I'm going to award him 7 points. I think that's a fair score and a fair and accurate representation of where he ended up in the race. And yeah, the moaning got to me, and it's the Crawl Room, and if you start to grate on me, then I'm going to start knocking points off. Alright. And then we come to Valtteri Bottas, never going to be a world champion while he's at Mercedes. And what can be said about his race? He ruined it himself. He didn't get off the line as well. He slipped down to 4th behind Stroll and Max Verstappen. Eventually got past Stroll again, and then never got in touch with Max. He got within a few seconds. There was a brief period where they were going through traffic where he got within 2 of him. And then in the race, he just stayed 3rd, and then they elected to pit him on the second to last lap to go on to new medium tyres so he could guarantee himself that fastest lap point. He did have the fastest lap point anyway, but they just wanted to definitely make sure that he got it, which he did. and he broke the track record with that as well. So that's some consolation, I suppose. But another 10 points lost in the championship, so he's 40-something behind now, and yeah, he needs 2 DNFs now, Hamilton, and Valtteri needs to win both. So it's all over. It's all over already. And he's your teammate. Silverstone didn't help, I know, but you've not been delivering the kind of stuff when there's a Red Bull in between you. So for Valtteri Bottas, I'm just going to award him 6 points. It was an okay race. It was slightly above average. And because he had the fastest lap point off of Hamilton before they elected to pit him just to guarantee it, if that makes sense. So that's what makes it above average. Apart from that, it's a 6. And then we come to Lance Stroll, Daddy, buy me a racing team. And what can be said about Lance? Well, he finished 5th on the road, but he finishes 4th on this list due to a 5-second time penalty for his teammate Sergio Perez. Yeah, we'll go into that one in a second. But for Stroll, you know, he had a lightning start, a fantastic start without a doubt. Up to P3, held Bottas off for a couple of laps before Bottas eventually slipped through in the DRS. And when it came to, you know, it was a solid drive. He went for the 2-stop strategy. Perez elected for the 1, which is why they ended up behind each other. And I reckon, in all honesty, I think had Perez not had the 5-second time penalty, Stroll would have been able to get in and overtake him anyway. But because of the 5-second time penalty, they thought, let's not risk it, maintain position, and then they'll just switch after the race, which they did. So I'm not discrediting Stroll at all, really, to be honest with you, in regards to finishing ahead of his teammate because of the penalty. Because I think, judging the pace he had, he'd have got it anyway. So for Lance Stroll this weekend, another faultless weekend by him, a bit like Hungary, but in Silverstone he slipped down the order. But we come back into the Barcelona, the Spanish Grand Prix, and he did a fantastic job. And for that reason, it's going to be 9 points. I think 9 points is fair. And yeah, a decent effort by Stroll. Well done to him. And then, of course, as mentioned, it was the fellow racing point car of Sergio Perez that finished 1 place behind him as a result of a time penalty for ignoring blue flags. A 5-second time penalty was given. They showed us what happened, and it was very much Hamilton was behind Perez at the start of the main straight. Hamilton got DRS and just overtook him. But apparently that wasn't within 3, so obviously there's quite a lot of lights and flag marshals down the straight. But if the car behind you's A, faster anyway to come round and lap you, and B, has got DRS on you, then I don't see what the issue was. I couldn't understand why that was a 5-second time penalty, because Hamilton didn't moan to say he'd lost time. Not that we heard anyway. And Hamilton is quick to moan if he did, so we would have heard it. And then it didn't affect anything. It didn't affect anyone or anything. So it was just a bit bizarre. But, you know, I think the FIA thought, had nothing happening in this race. We best give someone a time penalty for something, because that's the way we roll. And so they did. But Perez's race overall was a great effort. He slipped down the order a little bit at the start and lost 1 position, and then came back through the field and did a solid enough job. It was after Alban eventually got past him. And yeah, then in the race it just, P4 on the road, and I think, like I mentioned, Stroll would have got him anyway as a result of 1 stopping. So 1 stop has to be commended, because there were cars out there really struggling with the tyres today. Especially Kevin Magnussen, when we had that lap where he just tumbled out of contention, because they did literally fall off the cliff. But for Sergio Perez, I'm going to award him a solid 8 points. I don't think he did as well as his teammate this weekend. And overall, not a bad effort, a solid enough effort. 4th and 5th for the racing points. And I think you got beaten by your teammate this weekend, and that's why you get 1 point less. But a fantastic return considering he's had 2 weeks out of it. 8 points, I think, is fair. Next up, it's Carlos Sainz, and an interesting race for him. He was up, down, all around, shake it all about kind of thing. You do the okie dokie and you turn around. Very much McLaren-esque, because McLaren seems to be going up the order, down the order, all the way around the order, and then sort of finishing where they started. And that was exactly the same for Carlos Sainz this weekend. He got as high as 5th at one point, not pitting, then dropped as low as 12th at one point after the pit stops, and then ended up just mingling his way around and finishing where he started, which was P7. Had the measure of his teammate both in qualifying and the race this weekend, which is not seen much of. To be fair, this season it has been very much a Lando affair. So for him to finish P7 while his teammate was down in 10th, I think is decent. You know, he outraced his teammate. And his race pace was good. He went on the softs after the first round of pit stops, and that really, really helped him and brought him back up the order. and he got ahead of the likes of Alban and stuff who had pitted for the hard tyres, and that really, really helped him maintain that 7th. So a good strategy by the McLaren team to do that as well. And overall, for Carlos Sainz, I'm also going to award him 8 points. I think it was a solid race weekend by him, a good drive, and some points over his teammate, which is what he's lacking, is what he's been lacking these last few races. So a solid 8 points for Carlos Sainz. Next up is Sebastian Vettel, and after what can only be described as yet another disaster of a weekend, really, out in Q2 once again, 4/10 slower than his teammate in qualifying, and then in the race it looked like it was just going all wrong again, wasn't it? It was struggling to battle in the points, and yeah, picked up a few in the end though. Finishing in P7, picking up 6 points. Now, that doesn't look sparkling, and it really isn't on the grand scheme of things. You think Ferrari P7 and Sebastian Vettel. But he made those soft tyres last for over 30 laps, which was crazy. He pitted on lap 20-something or other, and there was 66 laps of that race. So, in that sense, it was a brilliant effort. And the fact that there was miscommunications once again within the Ferrari camp, when they asked him, do you think you can make these tyres last till the end? And he was like, I asked you that earlier and I got no response, guys. And I've been driving flat out on soft tyres thinking I'm pitting again, really. So he took the best in the life out of the tyres. And unfortunately for him, it meant that, yeah, I can go to the end, but I'm going to lose places. And he was as high as 5th at one stage, but slipped down a couple of places, ending up finishing in P7. So a good effort, a really good effort actually, and I know this relationship with Ferrari has broken down and really gone south now, but I think he made up for what he lost in the qualifying by making those tyres last, and it did prove something to Vettel. And he also got driver of the day, and I think it was well worth the effort. I think that was a solid effort to get driver of the day, and it was nice to see that the fans coming together and giving him that vote. So for that reason, I'm going to score Sebastian Vettel a solid 9 points. It's probably the most I've given him this season on the Cruel Room so far. But yeah, he deserved it. Okay, the race was all unfolding and it was going Pete Tong, and the qualifying wasn't brilliant, but in the end, he made some soft tyres that were absolutely knackered last, finishing P7 ahead of the likes of Gasly, Alban, and Lando Norris that were all behind him in a train of cars and they couldn't get past him. So, fair play to Sebastian Vettel. Next up we come to Alexander Albon, and what can be said about him? I actually did put a tweet up after the qualifying session and said, look, P6, it's nothing special, but from here hopefully he can build on it because he was only behind the racing points, whereas the last few races he's been behind the likes of Sainz and Norris and a Renault occasionally, down in P9, P10, sometimes not even making it into Q3. So I thought this is a brilliant chance now. Hopefully nip past the racing points on the start because he's good at starts, and you know he's done some fantastic overtakes around the outside, and then he can maybe keep on the back of the Mercedes and his teammate in the fellow Red Bull. But it wasn't to be. He got stuck behind the racing points, and then for some reason Red Bull put him on the hard tyres, and he just lost it all then, didn't he? He was on the hard tyres, Sainz had a pit stop, he was on soft tyres, he nipped through, and it all just came undone from there, sadly. And P8 was really the best he could get at after that, although I think he should have really been able to slip past Vettel. So overall, a poor race, but I do blame Red Bull slightly more than I blame Albon. But Albon forced himself to be in a situation where Red Bull has to try something different. So for that reason, I'm going to award Alexander Albon just 6 points. I don't think it was a particularly brilliant race by him. The qualifying was okay. It wasn't anything special, but it was okay. And in the race, I blame Red Bull for him finishing P8, but I'm questioning where he would have finished had it not been for that hard tyre strategy. And looking at it, I think it'd have only been 6th. So for that reason, I think 6 points is fair for Alexander Albon. And then we've come to Pierre Gasly picking up more points with P9 in the AlphaTauri, and a solid enough weekend by him again, once again into Q3, qualifying in P10. In the race, he was high up as 7th at one stage, and in the end, finishing in P9. And overall, again, a good race by him. Just a brilliant race. He didn't make the best of the tyres when he had the tyres to be in. I think because he was in that pack, when they were pitting, they're always coming out in traffic, and that's what cost him the couple of positions as opposed to actual overtakes. It was on track as the reason why he lost out the positions he'd potentially gained. And obviously, with Vettel one stopping ahead, he was always going to be behind him. But overall, P9, it was good. It was a good race. And once again, out-qualifying his teammate, out-racing his teammate by a mile. and picking up a couple more points for AlphaTauri, which, if it was in the hands of Kavia all the time, he's not really scoring that many points. But Gasly's just scraping it into the top 10, even when the car might not necessarily be top 10 worthy, and for that it has to be commended. Pierre Gasly is one of my drivers of the year so far, I've got to admit. That podium in Brazil has really rejuvenated him from last season, and he's come into this season with a fresh mindset, and he is delivering consistently now. Really, really delivering well. So for Pierre Gasly, I'm going to also award him 8 points. I think that was a solid enough drive once again. And yeah, he certainly deserves all the points I've given him, and he deserved those 2 points today. So well done, Pierre. That was another top job. Next up in P10 is Lando Norris, and qualifying 8th, just behind his teammate, is an okay effort. Science out qualifying Lando, a rare occurrence, but he did do it this weekend, and then he was out-raced by his teammate by a country mile. Slipped a couple of positions back off the start line, and then was mingling around with that P12, P8 area, mixing it in that area, not doing too well. And yeah, did a couple of good overtakes from what we saw, and scraping the final point is okay, but nothing special in comparison to your teammate who was finishing P7. So yeah, for that reason it's short, sweet and simple with Lando really. An okay weekend, picks up 1 point. Not the best we've seen of him though. So for that reason it is just going to be 6 points to Lando Norris. His teammate delivered more this weekend. Then we come to the ones just outside the points, and it's Daniel Ricciardo next, finishing P11. And a lonely race by those Renaults really, wasn't it? Yeah, it's really difficult to judge the Renaults actually. I was trying to think what's actually happened in this race that I think they deserve points, to be honest with you. But Ricardo, he just kept it clean and tidy, and he finished P11 after running round pretty much P13, P14 all the race. Yeah, just a tricky one. Just a tricky one, to be honest with you. I'm not really sure how they gained the places that did it towards the end. You could see the midfield, they were doing okay. You could see they were pitting and dropping down and stuff, and you could work that out. You could work the back of the field out. But those 2 Renaults were just so inconspicuous this weekend. It was unbelievable. But all I'm going to judge him on is the fact that he was outside the points, which isn't brilliant. He outqualified his teammate. He outraced his teammate, hands down. And for that reason, it wasn't anything special by the Renaults. Not in the points, not great. So I'm just going to score him 6. I think it was an okay race, but not in the points. Renault, again, I know it's probably the car more than the drivers, but I expect the Renaults to be higher up. And finishing out the points, I can't really give you any big points for that. So 6 points to Daniel Ricciardo. Next up we have Danny Kavia in the fellow Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri even. And yeah, P12. And yeah, okay, he tried to have a couple of lunges at Sebastian on the early laps of the race while they were running down 11th and 12th. Didn't make anything of those. And then was just outshone by his teammate once again. Gasly picking up a couple of points. Kvyat nothing. Yeah, nothing really. Nothing really stands out from me from AlphaTauri's point of view with Danny Kvyat. He didn't really deliver anything this weekend. He was never really in the points. He was never in the mix of the points. He was just behind a gaggle of cars, and that's where he stayed, at the back of it. So for that reason, Danny Kvyat's just going to score a middle of the road 5 points. Nothing spectacular this weekend. But yeah, nothing great, nothing worth mentioning, just an average race. And then we come to possibly the worst performance of the weekend, without a shadow of the doubt. And it was Esteban Ocon, finishing in P13 after crashing in FP3 with a silly error. I mean, I blame both drivers, to be honest with you, K-Mag and Esteban Ocon, for the incident that happened in FP3 with him pulling out the way, K-Mag, but then Ocon not looking, and he ended up spearing it off into the wall and damaging the front and rear wing of the car. Lucky not to damage suspension, otherwise he would have been out of qualifying anyway. And then, yeah, out in Q2, behind Raikkonen, and then in the race slipped down to 16th and stuck with the back markers for a long part of the race, 40 laps plus. It was behind the likes of Raikkonen and Magnussen and people like that, and then eventually nipped through, and then 13th, and that's just diabolical. A really lonely, poor race, and a lot of head scratching to go on there at Renault. It wasn't their best weekend by far, but for Esteban Ocon, that was poor. That was really bad. And for that reason, it's going to be just 2 points. Unfortunately, that was the worst performance of the weekend, in my opinion. That was nowhere near worthy of been there, to be honest with you. That was bad. That was really bad. And then we come to the driver of the day, in my honest opinion, is Kimi Raikkonen. You think, wow, P14, you're giving him driver of the day. Well, hear me out. P14, after qualifying in P14, the first Q2 appearance of the Alfa Romeo cars. Fantastic effort to out-qualify Esteban Ocon, let alone just getting into Q2 itself. You know, I was thinking Q2 is going to end up 15th here. 14th, even better. And then maintained that position early in the race. He did slip down to 16th at one point. And then in the backmark field, the Williams, Haas and Alphas were going hammer and tongs if you was looking at the bottom of that screen. They might not have been showing that you're in the race, but it came to the stakes where it was like the pit of both Alphas, and then they were 19th and 20th, and then both Williams came in, and then they were at the back. Then both Haas's pitted, then they were at the back. And in the end, they all ended up in an intermingled order. And it was Raikkonen on top once again. And a fantastic effort. Well done, Kimi Raikkonen. A brilliant, brilliant race by him. He did some brilliant overtakes as well, some cracking overtakes. Nearly went airborne on Grosjean as Grosjean late moved down the finish straight. And yeah, nearly went airborne, but thankfully didn't. Did an overtake on, of course, George Russell, Latifi, and also on Kevin Magnussen, Grosjean's teammate. He overtook them all because they had a late pit stop strategy, Alfa Romeo, and then it allowed them to come through and beat the cars that they're racing around. P14, the best he could have hoped for this weekend, really, in all honesty. He beat the cars that they're racing around after qualifying P14 as well. So that is going to be a solid 10 points to Kimi Raikkonen. That was the best drive of the day. He kept that car doing, he made it do things it shouldn't be doing, to be honest with you, and I think it's fully deserved of the 10 points. And then we come to Kevin Magnussen, who made the one-stop work-ish. He finished behind Raikkonen, so he didn't quite finish ahead of the cars that he was racing around, but one stop in on the Haas, which has been known for terrible tyre degradation. A brilliant effort finishing P15. Out-qualified Grosjean as well, after Grosjean was showing some mighty pace in the free practice sessions, but it came to nothing in the qualifying, with Kevin Magnussen out-qualifying him and finishing the session in P16. In the race, as mentioned, it was a mixed up back of the field. They were mixing it up with each other, different pit stop strategies, etc. And in the end, it came out that, you know, it was Kimi Raikkonen on top, followed by Kevin Magnussen, and Magnussen did a solid enough drive there. And for that reason, it's going to be a solid 8 points for K-Mag. So well done, K-Mag. Top drive. And now it's time for the only Italian on the grid. It's Antonio Giovinazzi. And what could be said about Antonio's race? Yeah, it was okay. It was nothing special once again. Giovinazzi was out in Q1 and finishing last, P20, after going wide and damaging the floor in the session. And then in the race, he wasn't on pace with his teammate. But recovering to P16 is somewhat of a bit of consolation. 4 places gained, 1 retirement, so it was 3 on merit. And yeah, in the end, it was okay. Okay, nothing special. So for that reason, I think it was above average, but it wasn't anything great. So for that reason, it's going to be 6 points for Antonio Giovinazzi. And then we come to George Russell, and after getting knocked out in Q1, so he couldn't make it 5 races in a row that he got into Q2, in the race, they were pretty much at the back, as mentioned, but they were mixing it up. George got as high as 13th at one stage, and then slipped back down the order, and ended up finally recovering to P17 on the road. And all in all, an okay race. At the end of the day, when they're at the back of these grids, it's difficult to judge. But I think George ran a good race. There was one point where Latifi was like 18 seconds behind Russell, so Russell was giving it everything he possibly could. And in the qualifying session, I think he got the most out of it. The car in the free practice sessions didn't look like it was capable of Q2. He didn't get into Q2. I'm not going to knock him down for that at all. So for that reason, I'm going to award George Russell 7 points. I think it was a good race. He had some good battles, but ultimately didn't get ahead of the Alphas, and Haas beat him as well. So 7 points for Russell. He did outrace his teammate, but fortunately that was about it. And then we come to Nicholas Latifi, as mentioned. That is going to be George Russell's teammate. And yeah, as mentioned as well, 17 seconds behind him at one point, and in the end he finished about 6 seconds off him. But I think Russell had another pit stop, so that's probably what brought them a bit closer together. And unfortunately for Latifi, it was nothing special. He did get as high as, I think it was 17th at one stage, maybe 16th with the pit stops, and then tumbled back down the order again, just finishing ahead of Grosjean as he had a late spin, did Grosjean, and had to pit for another set of tyres. And yeah, to just finish ahead of Grosjean, it's nothing special. And yeah, a shame really. So Latifi is still getting there, is still working and still building on, delivering. And compared to the last couple of races where he's shown a bit of promise, this weekend, sadly none of that was shown. So for that reason, it is just going to be a middle of the road 5 points to Nicholas Latifi. And then last of the finishers is Romain Grosjean. And what can be said for Romain? Well, in the early part of the race, he was looking okay. Okay, and that's all I can really say. And then towards the latter half of the race, it all came undone. He was the only one to offer any sort of excitement with a couple of laps to go. When he had a late half spin, flat-spotted his tyres and had to pit once again. A dangerous move on Kimi Raikkonen to jink at the end of the start-finish straight, just going into turn 1. As I mentioned with Raikkonen's review, he could have gone airborne quite easily with that. And it's just a shame to see him doing these silly things for positions that don't really matter. And I know they do matter because you do want to finish ahead of any competitor possible. But you've just got to think that it was a stage where Raikkonen was on much fresher tyres and you got nothing left with yours. It was clearly there. It was clearly coming. There was no need to jink like that and cause a potentially dangerous accident for something that was like P15 on the road. It's not worth it, Romain. So for that reason, it's just going to be 3 points to Romain Grosjean. A poor race, but I am just going to award him some points because his free practice pace was particularly special. We don't know why. Haas don't know why. We're probably never going to know why he was good, but the practice pace was the best part of his weekend, to be honest, because then it all just unravelled from there. And then we come to the last of the finishers, as our David Croft calls him. It's Charles Leclerc, of course, in the Ferrari, the only retirement, as mentioned. And yeah, he had a good race. He out-qualified his teammate. He was out-racing his teammate at the time where his engine just went into anti-stall or something happened and it locked the rear tyres up and he spun at the last corner. Tried to get going again. It didn't happen. Pulled into the pits. He complained of his seatbelts being potentially loose, which is a bit strange. And then just retired. He never came out the pits again. And yeah, the only retirement of the race. So I'm going to award Charles Leclerc, a difficult one to judge, but based on the fact he was out racing his teammate at the time, and that it wasn't his fault why he spun and why he retired, I am going to award him 7 points. I think that's a fair judgment based on the amount of race we saw. The only reason why I'm not scoring him more, even though I think he does deserve more, is because we didn't see where he was going to be in comparison to Vettel, because Vettel made the one-stop work. That makes sense. If Vettel had made the one-stop work and Leclerc had have still been... I think Leclerc, actually thinking about it, could have been as high as about 6th, to be honest. But, it'd have been interesting to see. So because Vettel tried something different at the end, and we don't really know a fair assessment on where that would have put them in reference to each other, I think 7 points is as good as I can give. So there we go, guys. That was the runners and riders of the Spanish Grand Prix. And the results are just up now on what we've scored them so far. And how the leaderboard's looking for the Cruel Room Series. There's some high ones there, there's some good ones. And there's some drivers really not performing well at all. And, of course, Sergio Perez finally gets some more points on the board. A big thanks to Matty once again, Matthew D'Souza. I'll put his channel link in the description. He's the guy that does this screen for me. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it. And as always, let me know your thoughts and feedback down below. Any too high, any too low, we're too harsh, we're not harsh enough. As always, keep them comments coming. I look forward to replying and seeing how many of you actually do comment. It's going to be great to see. So thanks a lot for watching, guys, and much love.